We'll do a roll call. Go ahead, we'll bring the mayor in as soon as he gets here.
Mr. Jacobs?
Here.
Mr. Strackoff?
Here.
Ms. Christie? Here. Mr. Rodriguez?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. D?
Here.
Mr. Zutnik?
Present.
Mr. Travisini?
Here.
Ms. Patrick?
Here.
And Ms. Betchel.
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burnersville News Burnersville, the Courier News Somerville, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 9th, 2017.
Want to stand for the flag salute, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to note that the mayor has come in?
Don't tell me. I'm a homer.
The president later.
Trying to see if I could get back on my own property tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
good luck.
You may or may not be allowed, I don't know.
I heard there was a horse loose somewhere in town. Maybe he did give you a ride.
Okay, we have,
These are turning into budget meetings. There's an inside joke there, sorry.
okay, we have some minutes that we need approval. We have April 6 minutes. Has anyone had a chance to review them? Do I hear a motion?
So move to approve?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed or abstaining? Everybody has vote?
Six.
Trina? Yes?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good, okay. And then we have April 13th minutes.
So
Also?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, we'll move right along. We have some correspondence. I know we have this piece on 202 and 206. I guess it's the white group piece, right?
And these applications, there's requested extensions, but Trina's requested escrow from them. I would recommend you don't act until that actually deposit, so we can pay for the resolution if they need.
Okay.
The Weichert one, they expect to have it to me tomorrow, so we will probably have that on next week's agenda.
Okay.
John Udell from Weichert wanted to know if the board would require his presence here. Typically, they...
Generally, no.
No, I don't think it's required.
No, okay, he just wanted to make sure that no one had questions for him, because unfortunately, he had another meeting next week, so...
That's an approved bank pad?
It is.
That was a bank site?
It
They're
is.
just asking for an extension.
And that's for a one-year extension that we get?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
How many extensions have they had already on that?
I believe they've had
I'd
an
have to go back and
extension.
look, but there's been a couple since I've been here.
Well, they got this approval. I mean, I know we were on the board when we got this approval. I don't remember an extension to this approval.
They have. They had them last year.
That, all right. Well, I don't see,
No problem with that. I don't have any problem.
No.
Generally speaking, if you remember, things were extended by the Permanent Extension Act, which is a state statute. You could extend things until I think June of last year. So even the legislature recognized the state of economic slack. So, that's what you consider when you're trying to granting additional extensions. Also, have the ordinances changed? Generally speaking, the ordinances haven't changed, particularly for that property.
okay. And also the Roche, that one also, we're going to have that one on next week as well?
I just got that letter yesterday. Reach out to her and tell her that she has to submit an escrow check.
Okay. All right, so we'll hear both of them look at them again next week. Okay. We have two resolutions. We have the Affinity Federal Credit Union resolution. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yep.
Okay, we need a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor? Oh, no, we have to have a
Oh, we should do roll call.
roll call, sorry.
Is it only the people who are
I have.
eligible?
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Strackoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Mr. Travaglini?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall?
Aye. Okay. And the second resolution is for the Fresh Market. Do I hear a motion for that?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Strackoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Adelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Mr. Travaglini?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall?
Aye. Okay. Is there any public comments? Not seeing any at this time. Okay, I guess we're on to our ordinances that we want to talk about?
Yes, Don, let's do this one first. And basically, we're working with Mr. Bellardo and the Township Committee also to probably revise this draft, even though it was introduced. It needs to be amended as drafted to add back in or add in a zone that was omitted, I think unintentionally, which is the FFC district was unintentionally omitted, and the chart was stated to be the SFC district, but that's actually the SFCRD district, the Restricted Development District. So a typo is going to be corrected on the chart that's in your draft on the section 5. And an additional section is going to be put in to make sure that the SFC district, the regular SFC district, is also amended to.
Well, the SFCRD was not going, it wasn't supposed to be in.
Wasn't supposed to be in there at all? I don't know, that's what Larry, we thought it was supposed to be in.
The SFC, the SFCRD, the SFCRD
Was going to, Revere.
is revered.
So that's going to stay the same, that was the intent of the subcommittee, was to,
Can you refresh our memory as to what SFC or D and where it is?
That's,
Clucas Brook.
no, SFC.
Oh, FCRD?
Is Clucas Brook.
SFCRD
SFCRD is
Revere.
David Stoddard Court and Revere Court, up in, coming in, top of the hills coming in from Burns Township.
So that's not supposed to be changed, is that?
Well, I guess really was the,
Yeah, there was-
when the subcommittee had that meeting.
Right, and there was no discussion of that district at all.
There wasn't.
No, that
that
was
was-
part of the planned unit development.
That was part of the part of unit development, it was part of a settlement agreement, there's the parcel G development, and there was really no discussion of that at all, just because of the,
I would agree with Paul on that, because I don't think we took anything up in the hills. No. But I didn't realize that might even been a separate
So SFCRD, Revere and Stoddard, were not to be amended, and they go back to the,
they'll stay as they were.
all right. Frank, just from the measurement of the ordinance, you've got the drafting? The drafting of the ordinance?
Did I bring it tonight, Dean?
No.
Or you've got document control?
Yes, I did.
So SFCRD was not to be included.
Right.
I guess that's what we're hearing.
Right.
SFC,
Went over a couple of changes today, and that was literally one of them. The table at the bottom that related to lot coverage, to the size of the lot, was not included in SFCRD.
okay,
So we're going to go back and correct this so that we properly.
okay.
So because of that, what was going to happen is that John Bellardo preferred it, a new draft ordinance will be redrafted with a new ordinance number, be introduced probably on the May 15th meeting or something, the next meeting of the Township Committee, and introduce, get noticed, come back to you for for the consistency review report of that, hopefully final draft, and then you, if you were to find it consistent with the master plan, it would have its second reading sometime after that, by the next meeting of the Township Committee. If you had any additional things, if you had looked at this for this meeting and you had anything that you noticed you wanted to correct or change, that would be useful to put in those changes now when Frank is doing this new draft. But you've already seen this about 3 times. So, this is the one that makes the bulk standards a little bit more relaxed for homeowners who are trying to add on to their houses. Okay? So we don't hear any other changes, Frank, so I think it'll be, look forward to it at the
Yes.
June meeting.
This whole section comes out, so all of section 5 comes out because it even refers, the ordinance
The governing
provision.
paragraph is
Yeah.
inconsistent with it.
Right. And we do thank a resident who picked up on this and pointed this, the inconsistency out. So thank you, Colin.
Attention to detail.
Okay, so
So that you don't
That'll
take
come
any
back to
action
us.
on that tonight, but the next ordinance, we would like you to look at and think about and determine whether you find it consistent with the master plan. And Paul could address it more directly, but the idea of this ordinance, if we talk about the changes, site plan is triggered for many different properties, and sometimes it doesn't seem like it's that necessary for it to come to the full board for a site plan review. Paul, in working on these over the years, has found that all of these ideas could be things that could be exempt from site plan, even though they currently are trigger a site plan requirement, usually because a building permit is required. They're, let's call them de minimis or minor in nature, such that the zoning officer and the township engineer feel comfortable that they could review the drawing and determine that it's exempt or it's not exempt. What that would mean is somebody would go to Paul and the zoning officer, show on a drawing if needed what they were proposing to do. If they met the criteria listed in this ordinance, they would be able to proceed just based upon that exemption from site plan. If the zoning officer and Paul concluded that they didn't meet the exemption, or if they split vote, that would mean it would have to go to the board for a site plan review. And some things that go to you actually go to you with a site plan waiver request to minimize the degree of involvement. But these things appear to be things that most of us, as your professionals, have felt are really in the nature of things that could be exempted.
Just so that you have some context on where this comes from. Under the ordinance, if you have a non-residential property and you need a construction permit, you need a site plan approval. And it's pretty broad.
No matter how small, it doesn't matter.
If you're
Right.
replacing an air conditioning compressor on a non-residential building and you need a building permit, an electrical permit, you need site plan approval. I will tell you that for as long as I've been doing this, there are certain things that we've looked at and said, well, we're really not going there. An interior tenant fit up. So, AT&T has had dozens and dozens of those over the years, and they don't get them come here. Replacing mechanical equipment in kind, we haven't had them come here. So that's one thing we wanted to put in there and make it, written down so it's understood what we're doing and why we're doing it. We also added some other things that you've seen before that you scratch your head and you say, why would I have to come in here for a permit? The emergency generators, those kinds of things. And I think it's important when you look at this list of items that are exempted, the important thing is that it says in that section 2 The development shall not include any of the following which shall be required to obtain site plan approval. A new principal building, improvements that require conditional use approval or variances, developments that do not fully comply with all applicable conditions of prior approval, developments on property with outstanding health, safety, fire, building code, zoning, or traffic safety violations. So basically, if you got a good approval and you're doing what you're supposed to do, you can come in and do these things without coming here for a site plan.
That's a good idea, Paul. I think it's,
Am I missing something? Are you saying you wouldn't need a site plan approval for an emergency generator?
You would, yeah, absolutely. For non-residential, yeah, absolutely. Under this, you would not. But it can't need variance.
Different number.
So if you have an emergency, if you have a commercial property and you want to put an emergency generator, today, you need a site plan approval. Once this is adopted, if it met the setbacks, you would not need a site plan approval.
We're not concerned about noise or screening with emergency generators?
I will tell you that if it meets the setback, it's going to be fairly far from the property lines. And the noise, we don't have a whole lot to say because it has to meet the state standards.
State governs the noise
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah, that's
So
all.
whatever baffling or muffling they have to do, that's all required by state anyway.
Right, and that really only applies when you're testing the generator, because there's an exemption for generators for emergency operation.
So if there's no lights, you can run your generator, it doesn't matter how loud that sucker is.
It's not running all the time anyway.
Odd circumstance, but that's what it is.
Makes sense. There you have
It
it.
seems like every time I put one in a commercial building, I've had to test to the noise was not exceed a certain decibel level. And I always a fuss about screening it along with any other above ground mechanical or electrical equipment.
Right, but under our ordinance provisions, it couldn't be in front of a building. That would require variance. Those are the kinds of things that,
Would bring it back here.
Would bring it back here.
Okay, all right.
For residential, you say, for a generator that does come here?
No,
No.
no.
We had that case, what,
It only comes here if it.
If you need a variance.
If it's
That needed a
in
variance.
the setback. The one came to you was in the setback. I think the rear yard was 15 feet
yeah, in
required.
the hills and
Well, there was one of those.
There were two
That was unusual.
Actually, a few.
But the one,
So that would
basically,
come-
there's a variance involved. right?
Yeah, variance would come here anyway.
And those will still come to you.
Single-family residential permits don't come here.
okay.
that one was for the hills, that
Yes,
one
right,
that you're
right.
talking about,
That's right,
which
that's right.
required.
And that's, again, that requires different stuff, and that would probably end up here anyway.
Paul, you want to, just briefly walk us through the proposed exemptions?
Sure. A is for the maintenance and repair of legal existing improvements. That seems obvious, but, we've never required permits for that. The next is replacement in kind of things like the HVAC units that I talked about before. C is interior renovations with no interior site improvements, except that might be exempted by other parts of this ordinance. That's the tenant fit up the interior renovations that they do in AT&T and Verizon Wireless headquarters on a monthly basis. Groundwater remediation structures, that's actually exempted by the land use law, and it's a little bit redundant to say it here, but it's just the case. E is development undertaken by the Township of Bedminster. You would see elements of that as required if it were a review of a capital improvement project by the board. It is intentionally reserved for something that's going to come up later that I'm sure will happen, and we'll fill in that someday. G is for accessory buildings that are less than 300 square feet in gross floor area. They're approved by the HPC if necessary. And again, they don't require any setback variances, any coverage variances or anything like that. A guy with a commercial building wants to put a 300 square foot shed up. You need a site plan approval right now.
But you wouldn't under this.
You would not under this. A is improvements that don't increase the total impervious surface on the lot but more than 1,000 square feet. We got an application that's come in from Verizon Wireless. That was his Bedmont, I think it is. They want to reconfigure some of their patios. It's going to increase their square footage by, a few square feet. It would be crazy to have them come back here to the board. That's crazy, in my opinion. I talks about demolition activities, landscaping, fencing, those types of things that are a little more like enhanced property maintenance.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Question about impervious. Township gravel's considered impervious?
Gravel is considered impervious for lot coverage calculation.
FAR and the like?
FAR is not, building, so it's not FAR. It's lot coverage.
Okay.
But yes, gravel is included in impervious surface.
Here?
For
In Bedminster.
zoning purposes, but
necessarily
not for
everywhere.
stormwater purposes.
Okay.
There's two ways to count it.
And in the Highlands
It's impervious.
regulations and statute, it's impervious.
North of Pottersville Road, it's impervious.
Well, tree removal, you need,
You still need tree removal permits,
yeah,
and those all need to be done, but you don't need a site plan.
they'll come here.
And same with soil work. So if you're doing
Yeah.
significant soil work, you still need a soil, forget what our soil permit's called, but
Yeah, there's a soil movement permit. Again, if it's more than 2,500 square feet, then that's later on, then it comes here. J talks about exterior wall finishes, doors, those similar improvements. Again, HPC approval would be required. I'll tell you that
Where it is required.
where it is required, HPC would have to nod their head on that one. K is solar and photovoltaic facilities, mount on building roofs, rooftop installations. Again, it doesn't, nothing on the ground, and have to comply with everything else in the ordinance. Irrigation systems, emergency generators, parking lot modifications that don't, that increase the impervious by more than 1,000 square feet or disturb more than 2,500 square feet. Once we get above those thresholds, they would come here. Sometimes somebody needs to add a parking stall. Again, if they add the parking stall, the way we look at it is, yes, if there's a buffer there, you got to move the screening out with it. But it doesn't have to come here if it's less than 1,000 square feet, which is a couple of parking.
Okay.
And of course, it has to comply with.
Have to comply with coverage and the buffer setbacks and all of that. O is the replacement of site lighting with a style but different source. That's where the relamping from the halide to the LED fixtures that's going on all over the place. P is the modification of lighting for automatic teller machines. I think you've seen one of those, maybe more. There's more probably going to be coming in. Frankly, it's a lot of, effort for something they have to do under the state law anyway. The last one is signing modifications that are consistent with the ordinance that are approved by historic preservation if required. Okay, again, the sign would be completely in compliance with the ordinance. And then they would be able to do that without a site plan approval.
Paul, if somebody were to, say, be under the 1,000-foot threshold to add more parking spaces and then come back next year and do it in the next year, how would you handle that?
In my opinion, it would be cumulative. I think you can put 1,000 square feet a year for 10 years and get a quarter acre. We do the same thing as it relates to the township stormwater ordinance. It becomes cumulative. You can't just add them together. You can't do 600 square feet one year and 600 square feet next year and say you haven't done 1,000 square feet.
I mean, do we need that wording in the ordinance, or it's just kind of assumed, or what?
The record of this will go in the file. I suppose it could be put in the ordinance. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that without, completely rebooting the ordinance. Is that the way?
So long as the compliance remained in effect for setbacks and all that sort of thing, I mean, it wouldn't matter so much if they added another parking place and another parking place and another parking place, so long as it all conformed and they weren't looking for a variance.
Well,
Is that correct?
you'd have
Well,
impervious.
the issue is how much you keep changing it until it looks like something else,
I see.
and
Well, you'd have impervious too, right, Paul?
yeah, you have the.
So that would,
So it's just got to be in
Have a
compliance.
bulk coverage limitation.
so that would
don't they?
cause a variance.
Yeah, so it has to be in compliance. I mean,
Right.
you can add and you can add until you're out of compliance and then you need a variance.
Yeah.
Rich, you're thinking about something?
I'm thinking about, and I'm not looking forward to having to go for site plans anytime I got to do a tenant improvement, but there's a trend with tenant improvements, and maybe this is tabled till we look at the ordinance and some master planning issues, anyway. And you're probably seeing a lot of building permits for what they call this benching of office space. I've got not just call centers, I've got banking operations where they're trying to get to a 1 person per 100 square feet standard. Which if all those people have to park, I could see it becoming, it's a nightmare for me to try to accommodate people who have those kinds of needs when they come to me and say, I need 6 per thousand parking or 7 per thousand parking. I only have 4 per thousand parking. That's all I ever had to have. That's all the code says I have to have. And maybe I can get some more in here, but I've got bulk limitations, I've got coverage limitations, I couldn't get you 6 if I wanted to. And it's becoming more and more of a trend, and at what point do we raise it to the level of, they're going to cause a problem?
Well, I can tell you why that's problematic. Let's assume for the moment that somebody wants to do that. You're going to reduce the size of the offices and have 50% more offices in the same space. They come into here for a site plan approval. Parking standard is based on the square footage of the building. You can't say no.
It doesn't, it's not,
It
most parking centers are that way too, but
That may be, what you're talking about may be a
That may be a
relook
different
at the
subject.
parking standard, which in the context of this might create a variance as it relates to parking if you're, stacking in the cubicles like that. That may be where that goes. I don't think it necessarily changes this. I think it's a parking issue and relates to the parking ordinance and how you might recast that.
And by the way, if you remember, we've had at least one application where the applicant wanted to expand their parking to be able to serve tenants who wanted at least 5 per thousand or 6 per thousand, something like that. So they were adding parking spaces to an existing lot.
Look for a variance to
over
do
at the
that.
hills, yeah, and not a variance. There were some adjustments of the variances they already had. They had enough land to do more spaces. It was just the more modern office trend of benching, and they didn't use the word benching, but they used the word cubicles, I think, or open space offices. And I guess that will be a trend, but that might be a reason to look at the parking standard.
Okay.
Is that an issue with the maximum spaces?
No.
We don't- do we have a max?
No, it's an issue with the minimum, and a new site plan, if somebody said, to you, really, we have a lot of employees and we're going to have 7 per thousand, you could not say, give us more parking spaces, because your ordinance is 4 per thousand or 5 per thousand, whatever it is. So,
Well, if we continue to approve building permits with 7 per thousand occupancy, even though the building only had 4 per thousand as a 200,000 square foot building,
There will be a problem.
at some point, we will have a problem.
Right, and I think that.
maybe they'll tell you that Uber and Lyft is going to do everything for everybody, and there won't be any cars, so.
And the driverless taxis.
Well, actually, it's the dream, so it's about to happen, it's already happening.
I think it's something to look at.
Something we defer to a look at the ordinance or the parking applications within the ordinance.
Frank, you're thinking about something, or are you,
We've seen 2 major retrofits like what you're talking about in Hopewell Township. One was Janssen and the other was the Merrill Lynch site, which was built as a single-user campus and it was $500 a square foot. It is still beautiful. One of the big pitches they made was we're gonna have this beautiful landscape, and our buildings will be way back from the road, parking will be back by the buildings. They came in, the new owners who bought these buildings after the other project center went bust, came in and said, we need 500 more parking spaces. Janssen came in 2 different steps and put in 500 additional parking spaces. And when they did it, they spent a lot of time explaining to us that this isn't a parking space for every potential 100 square foot occupant. Half of them will never show up here, or they'll come in once a week, or they'll work from home and be on the road, but they're still having 500 parking spaces. So you got a very real point there. I think we're going to have to think a little bit, and in sites where there's lots of land left to put extra parking, well, it violates, in most cases, they maxed out the covers the first time, so you're going to automatically have to give them a variance for covers, or what are you going to do, say no, make them park on the grass? You know, we're going to find ourselves in those unfortunate conditions. At the end of the day, the user's stuck with whatever situation they create. The owner of the building or the tenant is going to not occupy a space that can't park the people that need park.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to enter that.
Along with this benching thing is something that the architects are calling open assignment. And open assignment means there may be 500 people whose address is this location, but they really only expect 300 or 400 people to come to that location on any particular day. So when you come into the office, you're working on the second floor in cubicle 47 as opposed to the third floor in cubicle 23. So they can get by with 300 workstations for 500 people. It's the ones where, you know, I have to account for 100 people to be there on any particular day, and do I have enough parking? And the representations I'm making in the lease document to accommodate 500 people on that when they all show up.
I will also say that Steve and I can corroborate what Rich just said when at a meeting with A&T about their stay here in Bedminster and their long-term outlook and their short-term outlook. Said exactly that, you know, it's, they go up, pick up a laptop and go to cubicle A, B, C, D, E, F on floor 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, and they're really not quite sure how many folks are going to show up. If you, it's not particular to the AT&T campus, but you bring it to any office situation, we're going to be dealing with that on a going forward basis. Coming back to the proposed ordinance, you know, Scott's point about as long as it's consistent with code. You know, I hear George and the idea of the cumulative applications. You know, struck me as soon as he said it, and now I'm listening to what Scott said and what Rich said, and I'm wondering, you know, maybe that's just okay. But even to George's point, it doesn't say one, you know, the cumulative nature, if it's going to be one per year, and that may be something we need to discuss whether that should be, or we want that included.
I think go back to the answer, if there's a variance required, they have to come before us.
And have to have a site plan.
And have a site plan.
So long as it's conforming,
As
they
long as
shouldn't
it's,
have to, and if it's
you
not
know.
conforming, they have to come before us.
But so, Paul, when you picked that, and we are on,
And
we're on N? N. Parking lot mods that do not increase the impervious surface coverage by more than 1,000 square feet or disturb more than 2,500 square feet. So,
Where did I come up with those numbers?
yes.
That ties to the township stormwater ordinance. Because under the state stormwater ordinance, you don't have to do any stormwater management until you hit a quarter acre of impervious, 10,000 square feet. The local ordinance says that happens at 1,000 square feet, or 2,500 square feet, you have to do soil erosion and sediment control. That's where those numbers came from. They're consistent with the stormwater ordinance.
So let's take the George scenario, and instead of making it one application every year, let's make it 2 or 3 applications a year. So at what point would they then trigger that stormwater review?
Stormwater gets triggered cumulatively.
Okay. We do have some stopgap provision on too much.
Yeah, what would happen is if they did one of these in January and one of them in November for 1,000 square feet each, by the time they hit November, then they have to do stormwater management.
Doesn't necessarily require a site plan, but then requires an another
Under
level
this, it
of,
would not require site plan, but it would require stormwater management on the site
right. Okay.
to deal with the impervious.
The reason I asked the question about gravel is because feasibly some parking could be accommodated with gravel, or there's
Well,
there's
that's,
some-
that's
there's
a
something they
design
call...
waiver. That's a design waiver, that doesn't meet the standard, that would have to come here. Because our ordinance requires that
Well,
parking.
in other jurisdictions, let me put it that way, like in Connecticut, I used something called permeable asphalt even,
He's there.
and it would work here?
It would still be lot coverage, it would not require a design waiver, because it's.
But you still have stormwater implications that
Does that count as
would consider it
impermeable?
pervious.
Well, it counts as permeable pavement. Under the DEP rules.
I hate to dig it, I'm sorry to dig this hole.
but
I'm sorry to dig this hole, but...
trying to understand.
Rich, it's, impervious pavement is actually something that we were discussing probably about 7 hours ago.
Permeable pavement is permeable pavement, okay? It helps you under the stormwater standards as it relates to water quality. It doesn't help you as it relates to runoff, because the state says it has to be 60% pervious to be not impervious. And those permeable asphalts are nowhere near 60%. So that's,
It still counts as lot, no matter what, it still counts as lot
regardless of lot
coverage.
coverage.
Is gravel more porous than the angled
Probably.
permeable pavement?
I would think.
I guess the
Gravel
question,
probably meets the 60% too.
I guess the question really is,
No. About 30 or 40%.
and what is the baseline for good old Bedminster clay shale?
Really?
Yeah, it's a halfway back.
If you put nothing down.
A class on pool liner.
You don't need pool liners or anything.
Oh, the irony.
Some things you can't make up.
Haven't dug a hole recently, I needed to be reminded of
Come
that.
to our house.
Okay, Paul, where are
Oh, yeah, let's continue.
I think I've gone through everything, except the process where you come in with an application and the zoning officer and I look at it, we make the determination. As Tom said, if we don't agree, or if we think is something that is screwball, we'll send it here for a site plan.
Oh, quick question under item 2, which is things that basically shall be required to have site plan approval. You talk about improvements that require conditional use approval or variance. Is that based upon the conditional use of the property or the use of what the application is? In other words, if you have a conditional use, if you have a property that has a condition on it, but the condition doesn't have to do with an emergency generator.
No, it's
Then-
a conditional use.
Right.
It's in the ordinance under the list of conditional uses. If you're modifying a conditional use,
That conditional.
or you're adding a conditional use,
To that condition.
then it has to come here.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Using a golf course as an example, can you give us? Right, golf course is a
They
conditional.
are conditional use, so they do have to come in still.
So if one of the golf courses was adding 1,000 feet of impervious surface coverage,
They
they're
have to
they're
come.
not covered by that.
That's right.
Okay.
What would be the condition of that conditional use?
It's not the condition, it's the fact that conditional uses have to do a notice and appear before a planning board.
Well, I guess that was what I thought I was asking. So-
That's a good point, because
If
I've gone there.
If you're asking
Even
for
if you
something
accept them, though,
that doesn't have anything to do with the condition that's imposed on you.
If you are a conditional use and you're amending a conditional use by amending its site plan, the statute says it has to have a notice and a hearing. So as does a variance. So any variance cannot be exempt. Same with the conditional use. They have to be noticed. That they probably will be approved, but they have to notice and be heard. Not because of this ordinance, because the statute says that conditional uses and variances have to have a hearing, a notice.
So if we just look, use the golf course example, since I think that's something that we're all familiar with. golf courses are a conditional use permitted in the R10.
That's correct.
So
On certain areas of the R10 based upon the conditions.
whether it's Fiddler's, Trump, or Hamilton, someone's going to add 900 square feet of paving to the parking lot. 1,010 square
They're
feet.
amending a conditional use, they have to come into the planning board, not because of this ordinance or your ordinances, but because the statute requires it for all conditional uses.
And that's,
All
we
New
can
Jersey.
change locally, that's
No.
MLUL?
That's the statute.
Let me just one last time ask this. Is the golf course a permitted use with conditions? Or is it a conditional use, or is there no difference?
There's a significant difference in
Right.
its conditional use.
Okay. So if it's a permitted use with conditions,
No, things, don't use the word conditions when it, don't permitted use with conditions. Think of it this way.
Don't split that hair. We have conditions to every approval, don't we?
No, I think I know what the mayor's.
He knows where I'm
There are certain uses
yeah.
that have specific bulk standards that apply to those uses.
Those are standards.
Those are standards, and those are not conditional uses. I think sometimes we've called them permitted uses with conditions, but they're really effectively supplementary standards that relate to that use. It's not a conditional use.
Right,
Permitted use.
and then on a resolution, Rich, the conditions in a resolution are not ordinance conditions. They are just the conditions of that written resolution. That's right, and they are not by ordinance. Conditional uses, and it's hard to understand, but they are permitted uses under the law, provided the conditions listed in the ordinance, not in the resolution of the planning board or the zoning board, provided those conditions are met. So conditional use is not variance. It's a permitted use that's required to meet listed conditions of the conditional use. And if it does, it's a permitted use. If it does not, it needs a three variance, to be a deviation from a condition of a conditional use. I think you had one of those.
But if the other scenario is something like an open air club in the R10 zone that has specific zone standards associated with that use, those are sort of like conditions, but they're not conditional use standards.
They're standards. And then you'll see that in the ordinance. The ordinance, if it uses the words conditions of a conditional use, those are conditions of a conditional use. If it uses the word standards, those are standards, not conditions. And there's a lot of standards on all uses. There's even standards for some of the conditional uses that are not the conditions of the conditional use. It depends. I mean, you could rewrite the ordinances to change what are conditional uses. But you can't exempt them from conditional use requirements.
Yeah, and I guess, well, they would have to come here for conditional use approval, but not site plan.
That's true. That might possibly.
I mean, that's
But
a distinction without a difference.
Distinction without a difference. What is the distinction? Not much. You might be able to have fewer details on the drawing, but you can waive the details of a drawing by granting site plan waiver. So it's a notice and a hearing.
So if they wanted to do an interior change, would you consider that? We're still on a conditional use approval, use the club as an example. So if they want,
You don't usually require site plan approval for changes of interior of any building, and we're just making that clear.
okay, all right, that's, yeah,
You don't currently require it of anyone, it's interior only.
okay. You want to keep going, Paul? You got it?
That's basically it.
You've got it, huh? Okay.
I said enough. Trina's giving me the dirty look.
I did not.
You said this is going to be a short meeting.
We haven't hit 8 p.m. yet. I thought I was going to have to throw my shoe at Frank's.
All right, do we have any more questions on this ordinance? So how do we want to proceed
So
with
this
this?
one is, if you're ready, this one has been introduced, and I would recommend to you that you adopt a motion to find that it is consistent with the master plan of the Township of Bedminster.
Okay,
Is
do
that
I
the
hear
motion?
a motion?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Mayor Parker?
Aye?
Mr. Baker?
Aye.
Mr. Blackoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie?
Aye.
Mr. Adelia?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Duffy?
Aye.
Mr. Cavalini? Ms. Packard? And Ms. Beckhoff?
Aye. Okay,
And Trina, you can report that by memo to the Township Committee.
okay. Okay. Any planning board member comments? Do we have anything we want to talk about? No?
Just want to say, may the 4th be with you.
Oh, really?
May 4th be with you.
He's just getting it.
I heard it on the radio.
Uh-huh,
He's
okay.
a techie guy, we know.
Yeah,
He was wearing a
right.
stormtrooper outfit earlier.
Okay, Paul, you want to talk about EDC?
Yeah, the EDC headworks application is a modification to the sanitary sewer plant over there. I hope to get a complete review done on that by next week.
Okay. And Board of Adjustment, anybody, any other comments from the board? No. Okay, so how do we stand with these applications, Paul?
Ed 2 funding is, they're going to notice when they're ready to come back.
Yeah,
Lamington
Lamington?
Road is June 8th. They're
Next
going to have
week.
to give notice.
Oh, June, right.
Near SMSA, Verizon Wireless is next week, as is Raritan Headwaters.
Okay,
Yeah, we need to talk about what order they're in, because we have different attorneys on those. And because Tom is the home team, I would suggest we do Raritan Headwaters first. I think that's, a very simple application, and
Okay.
we'll have less questions, I think, from the board than potentially the Verizon Wireless, which is not particularly complicated, but certainly more complicated than Raritan Headwaters.
okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it. If anybody has anything else to say?
Well, I
Motion?
just want to say
Yep.
thank you to Paul and for putting together that proposed ordinance. So thank you very much. And, just so everyone knows, Paul, put that together. He had in his mind a running list of those applications that are so routine and, as Tom said, de minimis, that it's really not appropriate to make the applicant go through that effort. But the other thing that Paul looked at, and certainly we discussed as well, are those applications that don't come to Paul. Those inquiries that he may get a phone call, but he never sees the follow-up application because it's just not worth it for the applicant to go hire the engineer and the attorney and to make an appearance. So, we hope this is,
And the process costs more than the improvement.
yeah.
Yeah,
We hope this is, helps the residents and the businesses of Bedminster. Thank you, Paul.
yeah. Okay. Motion to close?
So moved.
Second.